and then maybe y'all fill in on stuff that's been either, this can be like, what's on your mind, what's going on in the world, what has your attention, what are you concerned about, or maybe things that you've experienced or discovered when you've been away from your home. Because one of the things that travel does, whether it's, going to see grandma for a week or going overseas, you always come home with a renewed sense of appreciation of place, community, heritage, and belonging. And you see things sometimes with renewed eyes just because you've been in another place to see with new eyes. And I always find that enriching. It seems to bring new ideas to me for what I want for my life and for my community. It always makes me grateful. So glad to be here. So what I thought I'd start with is this. Pope Francis is a fascinating person. And things that are percolating in the Roman Catholic Church seem to me to be of historic nature, comparable to those incredible 4 or 5 years when John the 23rd was Pope. That was late 50s or about first part of the 60s. And Vatican II was 62. When was that? Right in there. So let's go back to, because I got to walk past Pope John the 23rd's grave that's in St. Peter's Basilica. And, he has a feast day in our calendar, too. One of the most remarkable spiritual leaders of Christian history. He took a Catholic church that had gotten stuck somewhere around the Council of Trent after the Reformation, and just had a hard time unsticking itself. And he brought such energy and spirit and renewal. He gave the Mass back to the people in their own tongues. And I have lovely Catholic friends who thought that was a terrible thing. With every change, there's always a cost. And so now, though you could hear and understand the meaning of the liturgy, let's say if you're an American and you attended an Italian Mass in Rome, it was in Italian, not in English. And in the old days, it was in Latin, and everybody didn't understand it equally. There was something nice about that for many people. But he liberated an energy that to me showed forth most brilliantly in American Catholic nuns, that has brought vitality and outreach and service in a new way. He just made centuries of leaps that I think refreshed and healed and renewed the Roman Catholic Church in a way that I found thrilling, and I think and was also significant ecumenically. The next Pope, Paul II, looked like he was going to take that and really get that grounded into the Catholic Church, and had he lived, I think the Catholic Church would be so different. He died after 30-something days, and it was kind of mysterious, his death. And the Catholic Church took a hard right. Yeah, this is the early 60s, 1960s. Yeah, John the 23rd was, he might have been in like 59 or 60 elected. He was very old. They couldn't find anybody to elect. It took forever to elect him. He was not even a candidate. But the church was really, really split and unable to find a leader. And, we don't get to hear about what happens in the College of Cardinals when they're doing that electing. But out of a long, slow process, he came and was thought to be just a placeholder. He was, 75 or older, one of the oldest popes ever elected. They just thought he would kind of hold the place, and they would kind of regroup and figure out another way to elect the real pope later. He was just a gift from God. He was incredible. And then it looked like his spirit was going to continue in Paul II, and Paul II died. And then the Catholic Church took a hard right turn, and we got to see John Paul II's shrine. He's now been beatified. But John Paul II basically restructured the College of Cardinals, withdrawing from ecumenical things, and so much of the conversation that had begun between churches like ours in Rome, withdrawing from so much that feels conciliatory toward our spirit and spirituality, and I want to say maybe doubled the number of cardinals, and built a huge bureaucracy and packed the college with purity, doctrinal purity. Benedict then was sort of the result of, well, this pope has maintained a teaching that is consistent with the teaching of the church always, and has changed no teaching whatsoever, but is using the pastoral calling as a way of changing the emphasis of the teaching. And so what I'm hearing is the battle is going to be between Pope Francis and those who are allied with him. And one of the nice things about this, one of the things about this is that he really does have most all the cards. He doesn't have to have the College of Cardinals say, we agree with this and we like it. He can say, this is the way it will be. But what he wants to say is that for pastoral reasons, those who have in family life lived in ways that are contrary to the traditional teaching of the church, he would like to find paths of mercy to be able to restore them to communion with the church. So one of the main focuses there would be Catholics who have divorced, Catholics who have divorced and remarried. And as has been pointed out a number of times, you can murder someone and then be repentant and go to confession and be restored to communion. But if you divorce, you can't be restored to communion unless you go back to your former spouse, whether abusive or not, or unless you can find a way through the bureaucracy to obtain an annulment. And Francis says, as you can tell my own biases, that is an insensitive pastoral structure. And he would like to change that pastorally while continuing to say that the sacrament of marriage is indissoluble. And that's where there's a real strain in the church. Because if the sacrament of marriage is indissoluble and one divorces, well, let me kind of step into the side of those who are opposing the Pope. And we got to see a protest march, I guess it was, or at least a protest chant in March. A group from the order of Mary of Fatima, singing Aves and with signs talking about if we change or lose our doctrine, we're unfaithful to God. And so the place where Francis and the church is in a really hard place is that if you continue the tradition that marriage is a sacrament and therefore indissoluble, and someone is divorced, and particularly if someone goes a step further and then is remarried, then how can that ontologically be? And how can you offer people forgiveness and restoration to communion if, in essence, they are saying, I'm not repentant for being divorced, and I'm not going back to that dead or abusive relationship. So it's a pretty tough path to go. And whether Francis can successfully say that for reasons of mercy, for reasons of compassion, we are called. We must restore people to communion. We must grant them the gift of forgiveness. Now, he has allowed an extension of forgiveness to women who have had an abortion. In the past, forgiveness for abortion could only be administered by a bishop. And Francis has allowed priests in their pastoral office to offer forgiveness for abortion. And so that's an important thing. Some people have been restricted from communion on the basis of having had an abortion. So what Francis seems to be doing is trying to mediate law, dogma, doctrine, and tradition with the call of love and compassion. And he set it up in a fascinating way. Now I'm forgetting. Is it every 1,000? Every 100 years there is a year of Jubilee, or is it every 50 years? How often is the year of Jubilee? It started in the year 1300. Yeah, so it's every 50 years, yeah. So every 50 years there's a year of Jubilee. And during the year of Jubilee, there are, is it 4 or 5 churches that are churches of pilgrimage? 4 of them. We went to all 4 or 3? 3 of the 4. And you make pilgrimage to Rome. You make pilgrimage to these 4 churches. You touch the door, and the doors where they're touched are brass, and have where they are touched is bright brass, and we got to touch some of those. And you celebrate this year of pilgrimage. And you also get a year of absolution, which we thought was kind of cool. So our group is free of sin for a year now. There were several people making some bodacious plans. I don't think it... I'm not sure how that works. But the last Jubilee year, I think, was 2000. I think it's on the century and the 50, since 1300. Well, Pope Francis has declared a year of Jubilee, a Jubilee year of mercy. Thank you. And so he wants to spend a year of Jubilee in celebrating and extending mercy and extending the church's mercy, particularly toward families. And so some of the ways that this might come about would be toward families in more non-traditional paths. More generosity toward gay families, maybe. More generosity to families that have broken up, families that have reconstituted. More generosity to women who have had issues of childbearing and such. And so, a year of mercy. How will that play out? It has the potential to bring, I'll say from my perspective, and this would be from a particularly Episcopalian perspective, a breath of compassion and fresh air that I just find thrilling. And it could be as significant as Vatican II. There is, though, a lot of pushback. And so the American bishops are pretty divided. Most of the bishops that have been appointed since John Paul II and Benedict have been in office have been very, very traditional. The Pope Francis is finding his primary allies in Germany, in Western Europe, in some of South America, but in Africa and Asia, as in their churches, in ours, there's great, great resistance to these what we would call changes in morality, maybe, or what they would call changes in the moral teaching of the church. So it's a fascinating time for the Church of Rome. It's a fascinating time to be in Rome and pick up some of that energy, and then to visit those places where people have been praying and celebrating their faith through art for so many years. So I want to get into some of that and some of the holy places, some of the holy art we saw. But first, any thoughts or comments about this about Francis and what may be a real remarkable opportunity for the Catholic Church?
Well, I just want your thoughts about something. When he was elected, how, the last 20 years they've talked about the conservatism of the Catholic Church. How did he, yes, I just was fascinated by that whole process, and I wondered what you thought about that. And
every once in a while, the Holy Spirit has her way. I don't know. None of us is privy to the College of Cardinals. It's a great mystery, and they keep that really close. I got to be on the committee that nominated the presiding bishop, who'll be consecrated or installed next Sunday, and nobody's gotten anything out of me about that. You just keep that stuff confidential. So I don't know, but it sure feels like the movement of the Holy Spirit. Wow. Yeah.
This is just a comment. Since he's been elected, people of all walks just love him. It's not just Catholics. It's just all, if you talk to different people, they just love him. And it is the Spirit.
Yeah, he does have wonderful appeal across denominational lines, although not everyone loves him. Let's see. I don't know if I could pull this up quickly enough. Did any of y'all read the column by Ross? I'm not sure how he pronounced his name. He's the New York Times editorial, Deuthwaite. Deuthwaite? Does that ring a bell? What is it? Deuth?
I'm not sure that.
How are you going to say that?
I was going to say Deuthwaite.
Deuthwaite, yeah. He wrote this past week, and he is most unimpressed with the Pope's charisma. He sees it as theatrical, shallow. I need to find his words, not mine, but he used in his first paragraph of a talk about this and about how he's certain it'll fail. About 3 words, at least, or 3 adjectives that were not appreciating the style and persona of Francis, seeing it as superficial, as ungrounded. And so what he's saying is that this would be a change to the dogma, and between charisma and dogma, he says in the long run, dogma is going to win every time. So he says Francis will not prevail. That provoked a few hot letters. Anything else? Yeah, on being bothered with somebody else's underwear when we have our own to clean. It sort of feels a little silly.
It has come to my attention that many of the mainline churches are suffering in attendance, and the Catholic Church especially. I read an article that said for every new Catholic that, Francis is able to attract 6 Catholics leave the church. And, with the recent sex scandals, it seems that Francis is working to save the church.
Yeah, that's true for gosh, in so many ways. It's true in so many ways with the Episcopal Church and with most other Christian denominations. I know that for many years, the growth in the Catholic Church has been in the United States has been entirely fueled by immigration, and it's been a really drastically shrinking church, I don't know, worldwide things are so different in different cultures that it's hard to play the demographic game with much certainty. But so many for kids now in the United States, we're in so many ways we're kind of, I don't know if I want to say catching up with, but we're sort of following the post World War II and then World War II model of England. That religion and practicing religion has become passé.
I just had a question about the fact that Francis is a Jesuit, and they've made quite a bit about that he's the first Jesuit pope, and as opposed to, I don't know enough about the difference between Benedictine Jesuit. Why does that matter?
Yeah. So the Jesuits have been the teachers. Well, Dominicans are great teachers also and preachers, but the Jesuits have been the soldiers of the Pope. They are the order that gives their allegiance to the papacy, and their work has been primarily intellectual, theological, and to some degree puritanical, and yet also many creative Jesuits. And so they have been the order, I don't know about the order, but they've been an order that's had a gift for keeping the doctrine of the Catholic Church pure, intellectual, and sharp, and keeping that edge sharp. And Merton is not. Merton was Benedictine. He was a Trappist. Episcopalians are by nature Benedictine. So Benedict's spirit is in our DNA, and Benedictines did a lot of the founding of the church in England, and we just absorbed Benedict's rule, and I just love Benedict. God.
I know that all pastoral care is service to others, but the Jesuits, it's also service
Yes,
to others,
service
and
to
I think
others.
we see that in Pope Francis.
Yes. They've been important in outreach. They have gone to the ends of the earth. They do risky stuff. There's a wonderful trilogy. Is it a trilogy or 2 books? The Sparrow and Children of God by Mary Doria Russell. And, no, that's an Ignatian. Never mind. Okay, scratch that. The Ignatians really have been important in going to other, but the Jesuits were on the cutting edge of bringing the church to many parts of the New World, and so many of the many of the missions out in California, for instance, were founded by Jesuits. Higher education, lots of Jesuit universities, bunches of Catholic universities are Jesuit. Yeah. So there's this great intellectual tradition. And now here's a Jesuit with the heart of a Franciscan and with the name of Francis. And so if he can put together that huge heart of compassion and charismatic wonderfulness of Francis and the mercy and compassion that Francis, the original Francis has, with the intellectual rigor and authenticity of the Jesuits, that'd be cool. The Jesuits are Ignatius, yes. Is that that is, that's right. Yeah, Jesuits are. Yeah. So they're so. Let me go back to my novel, The Sparrow, and then its follow-up, Children of God. Fascinating pair of novels by Mary Doria Russell. It's a sci-fi thing. They find some 30 or 40 years hence, positive evidence of intellectual life. They hear music from space. and they use the resources of the Vatican and all the money and power to send the first ship to visit. And on the trip is a Jesuit priest. And holy cow, it's some of the best writing of any contemporary writer I know. And how we intend good, and oh my goodness, what can happen to us. Yeah. Mary Doria Russell, The Sparrow and Children of Men or Children of God? Children of God, I think.
So is it unusual for Francis to have sort of these positions as a Jesuit, or at least seem to?
You know, no, I wouldn't say that. Because of that willingness to be of service and be in the trenches and be with people, there is a great tradition of mercy among the Jesuits. Yeah. I think, big-hearted Jesuits are not, I wouldn't say unusual, but it's not the dominant charism of the order.
Well, as you can imagine, I was very happy to hear him, the Pope, put a focus on the, environmental stewardship. Did you see any signs of sprouts in that there, or has that just sort of been lip service that they're trying to say, no, that's too big to take on? Or
my sense is that, no, that's important and that's been embraced. I think that the urgency of the times, the Cardinals are in Rome right now. Yesterday, I didn't see the paper today, but yesterday they were going to start their confab. We saw the chairs in St. Peter's for the College of Cardinals to meet later. So, so the intensity of the now, I think, overwhelmed the environmental stuff. Did you notice any environmental things? Yeah.
Your key card in order to get the electricity on in your room, because it would go off. So there were a lot of things I noticed, but there was no recycling that I saw. And then at the Vatican, they actually had some recycling there.
Yeah, I saw recycling bins on the street, but they're on a garbage strike, so there was everything on the street. Whew. So, yeah.
Another question was just, were you aware of the refugee situation? Are they in Italy? Could you see people?
We couldn't see evidences of immigration issues in Italy, but boy, it's in the news. Yeah, it's a big focus because they are right there next to the former states of Yugoslavia. That's just right around the corner from them. Yeah, and they're close to Macedonia. All of that.
Background is that he was a scientist in a previous life, and I was curious if that's the case, if that knowledge by others may provide a bias in his work today. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I certainly think that's informed his environmental stewardship. When you elect scientists like Catherine Jefferts Schori and Pope Francis, you're going to get people who are concerned about the planet and about what every scientist, but 1 in 1,000 knows what's happening. So, I think that informs a lot of his emphasis. You bet. Yeah. So let me kind of move away from that to some other things about. Oh my goodness. Some highlights of being in holy places and seeing holy things. Just some bombs. After being in Catholic churches among Catholics for a week and a half, we then visited the first Protestant church in Italy, which is ours, the Episcopal Church in Rome, St. Peter's, within the walls. And it just felt so good to be home. And we walked in about 9:30. There they were in the side chapel reading morning prayer out of the Episcopal Church Book of Common Prayer. How lovely is that? And then we walked up to the altar and took a picture behind the altar. And Suzanne kind of melted in tears at that point. She said, "It feels so good to be welcomed as who I am here." And I didn't know that I was bothered by it in those other churches. One of the things I noticed, I don't know if everybody did, is how patriarchal and male-centered Italy and the Italian church is. It's just remarkable. And we were in, we were having lunch Friday, and it was the Wideners and me and Kathy. And in our families, Shay and Kathy run the money. Shay's the bookkeeper for Gary's business. Kathy runs a business of $19 million a year, as well as our checking account. I know nothing about the money. I just do what she says. So each of them caught the attention of the waiter and said, could we have our check? Could we have our check? No check came. No check came. I don't remember who was first, Shay or Kathy. And Gary and I, the dumb kept guys, are saying, is the check not come? No. Kathy said. So the other woman says, check. Can we have a check, mate? Nothing happens. So we're there 20 minutes, no check. I happen to see the waiter, and I kind of look at him. I go like this, check. Yes, sir. Check. Check is back. Yeah, it happens here too. But boy, it sure is reinforced in the church, and the gender things that are there for millennia in the Roman Church are profound, and will take a millennia to overcome, and that's a really big difference it just permeates every atom of being in the structure. Who we are and the way we work together, the way we are together, the way we walk the world. It's so profound I don't have words for it. But Suzanne and I stood behind the altar there in the Episcopal Church in Rome, and I could just feel what it meant to her. Yeah, and it's a good thing. It's funny what catches you and just transports you when you look at art. The piece that just I couldn't take my eyes off of was an add-on on our trip. We learned where it was located. We begged them to add it on. It's Michelangelo's Saint Teresa in Ecstasy, where look it up, where she is. It's Michelangelo's image of her ecstatic experience of union with Christ, and Cupid is piercing her heart with an arrow. Cupid's face of knowing this hurts, and yes, yet it's wonderful. It's just an incredible face, and Teresa's face of ecstasy, of union with Christ is just remarkable, just amazing. One of the more interesting churches was Saint Mary in Minerva, and on that, it's an off the beaten track church, but there's a Michelangelo Jesus holding a cross, a very simple statue, and on the other side there's a Saint Francis, John the Baptist. It's one of those times when you stand in front of this statue. They're the same height, they're the same period, two different sculptors. It's like, and you feel the difference in the gift that Michelangelo had. David is a remarkable piece and always just stunning. Years ago when I was in college, I got to see Michelangelo's Moses, and I couldn't wait to come back. And this time it was not so transporting. I stood in front of Moses as about a 20-year-old and just fed coins to the light and just stood there. It was like he was about to jump out of the marble back as a 20-year-old. But I was also this close to Moses. But now things are distant, and Michelangelo's Pietà is behind bulletproof glass now. Yeah. And so there's been a distancing in order to protect, and with that you lose some intimacy. And then, there's just, I'd never seen the Sistine Chapel before, and it's kind of mind-blowing. It's just incredible, and yet it's so crowded and cattle-like, and
Sculpture as you walk in.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
it's just, that was the other piece that most grasped me. Yeah, it's just beautiful, wonderful. And then part of the fun, I guess, and it goes back to the environmental stuff. Things in Venice get harder and harder and harder, and Venice is in trouble. But the tide was coming in on the days that we were there, and so we had to get boots, 5-year-old boots, to pull over our shoes and pants and walk around in. The water was this thick, about this high in the highest places in St. Mark's Square. In the street around the side of it, I walked into a restaurant, and I have a picture of people in their sort of outer kitchen doing the pizzas and things, and they are working in this much water that's come in from the sea and the channels. Yeah. I've got some water videos too. Yeah, let's pass those around. Send yours that direction. I'll send mine this way. It was. Venice is an endangered species. There we go. Yeah. So this is a street, a street near the center of town in Venice.